So in many ways, Jena Metro was a fantastic project for us because Jena approached us with this idea of they wanted an architectural-led vision for transportation plan for a city, but not now in the 23rd century, and then looking at all modes of transport and to show them how their city would look in the 23rd century, and then show them how they could phase it to deliver that vision. It's a crucial part of life after oil for Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia has an amazing culture, history, landscape, but it has a real restriction on the number of visitors that can actually accommodate. And the reason for that, it wants to open its borders to more visitors, but for it to do that, it has to enhance its public transport, of which there is very limited at the moment. We know that there is, at the moment, they restrict the number of visitors to 2.3 million a year, which is predominantly during Hajj and Umrah. But we know that there is 3 billion Muslims in the world who the idea of religious tourism and the ability to go and visit Mecca and do the Hajj or the Umrah during their lifetime is something that they want to do. It's just they have not got the ability to go there at the moment. So our interaction basically in Saudi Arabia started about 10 years ago, where we got involved in a project called Haramain High-Speed Rail, which is 4 high-speed rail stations that link the airport in Jeddah to Mecca and Medina, so the pilgrims can come through Jeddah and then have this distribution to allow them to do it. And if you look at what Haramain High-Speed Rail was, it was actually 4 stations, actually very similar to Eurostar, but probably with 10 times the number of passengers. So while Eurostar deals with 10 million passengers per year, we're talking about starting with 60 million and going up to something like 130 million. So what we designed, the stations are now finished, they're operational. We designed a modular system that could be manufactured off-site, brought to site, assembled, and we designed it like an airport. Because the passenger flows were so big, we had to separate arriving and departing passengers, and we came up with this framework which allowed you to accommodate through stations, terminus stations, all out of the same module, but it gave direct access to other modes of transport. Hence our relationship then with Jeddah. Jeddah's plan was really ambitious. If you look at this slide, you see on the left-hand side, you've got London Underground. It's taken 120 years for London Underground to evolve into the network that it is. Jeddah's aspiration was to deliver something of a similar size, grow the city twice its size, but to do it within a 20-year period. When you look at the number of statistics of what we were being asked to do, it was something like 69 metro stations, 30 metro stations underground. We had underground, above ground, and interchange stations, all of which we had to kind of design within the same framework. We saw the ability that because we had a significant amount of overground station and viaduct, there was a kind of about 100 kilometers of it. The city had a distinct lack of public realm because people find it very difficult to go outside during the daytime due to the temperature. But actually, so the coastal area of Jeddah becomes animated at night when the sun comes down. So we thought, could we take advantage of the viaduct as being a huge shading device? It's significant, there was over 100 kilometers of it. And if we did that, we could actually give back to the city something the size of kind of half of Central Park as a kind of byproduct of putting public transport there, which we thought, absolutely, this is what we want to do. There was also light rail tram and bus rapid transit networks. So the metro provided the north-south link, and the light rail tram and the bus rapid transit provided the east-west links through the city. We had a ridiculously short period of time to design it. They wanted it all finished in a year, so we had to kind of give ourselves a very tight timescale and basically assemble a team within which to do it with the client. we weren't starting from scratch. What happens with these massive transport projects is someone goes off and does a transportation plan, and in this case it was Sistra, a very, very good company, but what they do is they'll design a metro system, they'll design a bus system, they'll design a tram system, but they don't actually connect. They overlay it all, and it doesn't really work. As from a city point of view, and AECOM were off doing build a structure plan for the city. So we took all of that data, overlaid it, and played back to this and moved the pieces around to help shape the solution. The scope was all-encompassing, from architecture to engineering. We also brought in urban design. We were responsible for producing the cost plans. We chose to bring the real estate component into the project because we thought there was going to be a funding. There was cultural identity to give it a local feel. We also produced branding, industrial design, and transportation design. It was all about collaboration. So we wanted to create a culture of no surprises. It was only possible if the client was fully engaged in the sign-off. So we amalgamated 250 people all together in one space. We created a design office in London and a design office in Jena. And basically, we had a monthly sign-off process so that we never went backwards, we only ever went forwards. So the challenge for Jena Metro was, it's a sprawling urban mess, basically. It's 50 kilometers long by about 10 kilometers wide. It's grown from a small port in 1950 that hosted 50,000 people to a city of over 3.3 million. And just to make matters worse, if you look at the centre core, 50 kilometres away from the centre core, they're building the 1 kilometre tall tower to host 200,000 metres squared worth of accommodation. It's just, to create a new town centre that far away. So our challenge was to basically establish a plan. So what we did was we looked at what had been planned originally and convinced them that to make the public transport work, you actually needed to densify around the public transport and not have this urban sprawl that went uncontrolled to the city. The original plan that we inherited basically had 12% of the people leaving within a 10-minute walk of the public transport. So we were, how is that going to work? Because you're going to have to drive to the public transport, to get on the public transport, and then drive to get to your destination. It's the wrong model. We convinced them that the actual answer was to focus densification around the stations. With a particular focus on the interchange stations, and then begin to look at kind of the lineage of the outer connections. And what that does is it opens up the opportunity for much needed resources, such as recreation, food, power, to take place in the spaces in between the public transport. So conceptually, we looked at a design where the stations should connect directly into the adjoining development and have landscape corridors that ran straight through it and retail corridors that ran the opposite way. And then you connect directly into another station that does the same thing. And what this is actually doing is you're producing a network of public transport 1 kilometre apart that provides walkable distances in between and there provides walkable neighbourhoods between. And then, it was touched on a little earlier in the discussion with Paul Finch and Andrew Worley, but this goes back to the old principle of what railway stations used to be. Railway stations really should be destinations where you have a mixed-use hub at that location, where you have live, work, play, all together and learn as a destination. And then around the next station, 1 kilometre away, you've got a different mix, but it's a similar kind of hub, and you use the public transport to get between the two. It was a full-on, oh, interesting, it's not playing. So this was when we did the competition, we had to work very quickly. But what we actually did was we had we had all this data to establish how to design it. But actually, we felt, let's put all the data down and create 4 separate stations, and therefore actually demonstrate how to deliver the 4 stations. We had how the station would work. We had all the criteria aside. And out of that, we produced a vision for how those 4 stations would look, feel, work, integrate, and grow the city around them. We also demonstrated through a sequence of models how you could phase the project. So you see here the station being in the center of the project. And obviously when the station comes, we're envisaging that there will be real estate around there will be of a prime value. Therefore, that will begin to develop around the station. Then you can develop the second line as it phases, and the second line could go over the top, providing direct connection between the two, and then the direct densification would continue. But as a model to how to develop this, we took the DNA of something we did in the competition, and really our final solution just followed those principles. So ultimately, this is the scope that we designed. We designed metro stations, we designed special stations, connection to development, and BRT, and the branding, etc. But the rules we underpinned was, because we were building Haramain high-speed rail at the same time that we were designing Jeddah Metro, we actually had a test bed that was doing our testing for us, and we were able to say, look, the design principles we had originally sold you, you can now see them acting. One of those items was, when we took Haramain on, they wanted fully air-conditioned platforms, fully air-conditioned station. We said, you don't need it. When you get onto the platforms are a transient space. If you have heavy shading and good air movement, it'll be fine, and it'll bring the felt temperature down. And we were able to prove it to them. So we were able to use that evidence on the city. Again, we went out into the city of Jeddah. We took measurements. We looked at the direct effect of the sun, what it's doing to the urban realm, the heat it's kicking back, to then identify the best way of developing up these new stations, where the idea that you create an ambient temperature of somewhere between 24 to 28 degrees, we have good air movement, we have thermal mass within the station and the viaducts, therefore creating a very sustainable approach to public transport in what is a very intimidating climate. Cultural identity was an interesting, we didn't want to come in as an international architect and impose our own aesthetic on this project. So we noticed there was something really interesting with Jeddah, in as much as it's grown so quickly, there are no neighborhoods. What you actually have is you have these very peculiar sculptures, which anyone that's been there will have seen, where they're in the middle of roundabouts, and public art has become a wayfinding device around the city. So we understood this big connection between public realm and arts. We commissioned a sequence of 3 or 4 architects to work with us to actually help us give the local identity and wayfinding components to the city. So now to explain more about what we delivered. We actually delivered a metro station where we have 3 typologies. We had an overground station, an underground station, and an underpass station. An underpass station has to accommodate an east-west road, so it runs kind of in a north-south direction. This image ultimately shows our final vision, which was that you can see the elevated station creates a pedestrianised public realm underneath it, for a pedestrian connection to other modes of transport. And we also have these bridge links that connect directly into the adjoining development. If you then look at what that looks like in plan, you can actually see that you actually had some very challenging sites where, you can see here, this was a 12-lane road where there was no way of providing a pedestrian crossing. So what we did was, we knew that in the future you don't need 12 lanes. You'll need 6 lanes, 2 lanes. It'll evolve. So let's design a station that can straddle it, put it up in the air. At the beginning, it can provide a much-needed bridge link. So actually, there's an unticketed bridge link. You come up the vertical transport, cross across unticketed, and come to the other side. The stations are very easily planned that then on the kind of right-hand side, you have the ticket machines and the whole staff areas. The left-hand side, you have the gate line and the concourse and access up to the platforms. And then you have the ancillary buildings at one end. And you go up then to a platform. The platform then gives you connection to the trains. We looked at this and we thought it needs a lid on it. Obviously, it's got to keep the climate out. But there's real benefits in making this a modular system. Because actually, when you look at the passenger numbers, obviously, some of the city is already there and it's very dense, and therefore it needs a big station. But some of it's desert. And it's future-proof for capacity. So why would you build a station the same size in a desert that's got 1 or 2 passengers to somewhere in the center which has got thousands of passengers? So therefore, design a system that could be added to. We also then looked at designing a system that could allow the road to not be 12 lanes anymore. As the public realm begins to move under the station, you get the benefits of the shading, and you have the ability to come directly up into the station from below. And the real estate on the left-hand side gains that public realm as part of its ancillary space. You come up to a very simple then concourse, which is, very minimal in the way of wayfinding. It's pretty obvious. You go through the gate line, you head for the escalators take you up to the platform. And from the platform, it's all carved away, so you feel like you're part of the concourse, but ultimately then you're directly accessible from the train, from the platforms onto the train. And you see here how we're envisaging that then the real estate, these kind of the shops and the real estate on the left-hand side can then occupy the space outside, take advantage of the lack now of the road. The road has moved to the other side of the station. It's part of a phased development, but it becomes part of a sequence of events. This then shows you the experience of how we're envisaging it to work. Well, you'll be able to you come up the platform, you're onto the concourse. The concourse leads you directly onto the platforms. This also shows then how the development allows the transition of the adjoining development on the side, because on day one, that development probably isn't there, but we don't want to preclude it happening in the future. If anything, we want to allow it to be a very easy transition. The underground station works in exactly the same way. It has this unpaved route under the station, under the road, and then the gate line, and then the station. So ultimately, and it's a shaded concourse that provides the linkage, the protection at street level. And then really we've just designed it where we, as architects, express the structure. So you can clearly see the structure where it's the props supporting the cut and cover box or the vaults supporting the road. And then with a very clean ribbon-like wayfinding that runs through this platform. And you see here it takes you down to the platforms. This is a little video that just shows the sequence. So you can see that you're coming through an unticketed gate line, you're down the escalators, you come through the gate line, and you're passing through the space down into the platform. There was also the bus rapid transit and the light rail was an opportunity for us, because we actually designed a sequence here where we didn't want to have air-conditioned platforms. We wanted to have shaded platforms. So this was quite a clever solution we came up with. Nicely, the city is designed that either streets are north-south or east-west. So there's always a predominant sun angle. So we designed this as like a parent and a child, that one platform overhangs and shades the second platform. And therefore, we only have air conditioning actually for little pockets for people who would like to go in. We also found that there was very little difference actually between a bus rapid transit system and a light rail transit system. So why are they two separate systems, and why does it cost so much to make the transition between the two? Why don't you actually design it as one system? So what we actually did was we designed it as one system where the bus rapid transit was 45 meters long, as you see here. It's 45 meters long and the bus runs on there. They both have a designated route. And then there is the ability in the future to electrify the road. And then you increase the length of the platform as the trains are 90 meters long and the tram runs through. We also designed bus stops. This was quite a challenge because we had many different sites. So we designed a very simple kind of branded sunshade that was like let's call it a shaded wall that you obviously put in the direction of the sun and you hide behind it and you get clear access of the buses coming linearly. Where we have slightly more space, we have the ability to attach two shades together, provides an immersive sunshade. Where you're coming into the more kind of built-up areas now, we have an ability to air condition it in the center. And then when you actually get to the more dense areas in the center of the city, then ultimately we have the ability to expand its length and its size accordingly. We always wanted to create a family of components. So we worked with our parametric team in the office to make sure that all the curves were within the same kind of parabolic architecture. So that everything from the metro station, underground metro station, the bus stops, they all were part of a family and therefore you could see they were all of one hand. The rolling stock, we also wanted to produce our own unique rolling stock. We wanted a piece of timeless classic. We wanted something that was instantly recognizable as being Jena. You know, we loved the Zeppelin. We also loved the kind of the streamliner caravan. And we thought something that actually reflects the sun, takes on the impact of its surroundings was really interesting. So we were able to produce a fleet of transport where the trains and the ferries, you were able to completely transform them, where the buses, you had to work within certain constraints. But we were able to shape them, give them all this highly reflective kind of bullet-like appearance, which gave it a clear identity. But there's no point designing this if you can't afford to build it. So we had Jones Lang LaSalle in our team, who did a huge piece of work for us in terms of originally, the client wasn't really bothered about how to fund it because the PIF were just going to put their hand in their pocket and they were going to pay for it all in one go. But the oil price dropped, and suddenly that's no longer feasible. So therefore, we were, hang on a minute. The value of building public transport and the impact it has on the land values around the station, why do you have to let the private developer just get richer? Why don't you get that to bring that money, value capture, back in to help fund the public transport? So we looked at the market research. We did an audit of all of our stations to look at the profile, the built opportunity, to then grade them with the intention then of producing, these are all of our stations graded. The top 4 biggest opportunities we saw as the opportunity to create special stations. These are the 4. One was obviously at Haramain high-speed rail station, because you got 60 million passengers all trying to get off on the station, so it's of an obvious opportunity. Second one, the one down below it, is Old Makkah Road, which is the last station on the way to Mecca. So obviously, again, a huge opportunity, but I'm not going to talk about those two. The two I'm really going to talk about are Mall of Arabia, which was a very interesting site, because here you had an overground station meeting an underground station right on a triangle of unplanned land. And the mayor wanted a catalytic effect of the station to transform this area. So we took the opportunity of that to create a vision for how the station could be. So you have the overground station. The underground station is the T coming off to the side. Over the top of the underground station, we have a linear park. We have a shared entrance around the back, which is the white building right in the middle. And then we have commercial next to the station, real estate, residential on top of retail around the park at the back. The station then and the commercials shared an entrance. As you came in through the entrance, you come in from the drop-off and you have clear visibility of where the trains are and your way of getting to and from the trains, and all the way down to the platform. So there is a linkage between all of the levels for good daylight and visibility, all the way up to the platforms. But in many ways, the most interesting slide I think about this was actually, there's a business plan here, because what this does is Because we were in control of the costs of the buildings, so we knew how much the station cost, we know how much the real estate cost, and we know the market, what we were able to do was to illustrate that there's a proposition here, because actually the real estate will pay for itself in 14 years, and it can pay for the station in 20 years. That was probably the single most important slide that I've been, it's sent me a lot of projects since then. Also, so the other station we did, I'm going to show you, is Al Balad. So this picture here is actually an image of Jeddah in 1950. So this was a walled city in 1960, and Al Balad was the northernmost gate, which was the Hajj connection to go to Medina. If you then go and you look at what's in there, this is a 1,000-year-old city that has its original gate, and the architecture is absolutely fantastic. So it's a World UNESCO covered site. The problem is it's all crumbling around through its lack of investment, because funnily enough, the Saudi Arabian kind of people are not seeing it for what it is. So what we did was we saw the opportunity having to design 2 stations that form a cross right in the middle of a traffic interchange. Rather than build the obvious building on top of it, which was what everybody was pushing us to do, we said, we're not going to do that. What we're actually going to do is create a publicly accessible park, change the road traffic network so it's pedestrianised on one side, so you can walk directly from the station through the gate and into the city, and create a much-needed public realm. Use the investment money that is required to actually then use it to regenerate the city. Use it to kind of upgrade and put your new cultural buildings, your new real estate, your kind of hospitality buildings, do that within the existing buildings that are there below. We created a sunken courtyard for the entrances. We wanted to create the connections so that from both lanes, from both transport lines that were passing through, there was a connection. So when you're on one train, you can see the other train, and you get this interesting crossover, given that it's the historic city of the centre, the historic station at the centre of the city. And we allowed public transport to come all the way through. We also left Jeddah with a set of rules about how they could transform our stations in the future when the real estate partners came on board, be it overground, underground stations, and we showed them how to do it, and we gave them the rules. So ultimately, what we were left with was a 12-month period where we designed 1,000 components, but we had a common vision throughout. And what I'll show you is, to the end, is really a vision and a presentation that shows how it all comes together. So ultimately, this is the evolution of the city from that small kind of fishing port in 1950 through to this global metropolis of urban sprawl in 2019. So we were designing all modes of transport. We designed the map and how these modes of transport connected, but we still had to communicate to the people of Jeddah, what are we giving them? Why? Because this is the life they know. They're sitting in a traffic jam, being delayed getting from time A to B. But funnily enough, when they leave Jeddah and they come to London or somewhere on their holidays, they'll happily jump on public transport. But in their own country, they don't see the benefit of it. So what we were trying to say was, look, if this will allow you to speed up that connectivity exponentially, they will be part of a family. These were our trams, our metros, our buses. We had double-decker buses, we had single-decker buses, we had BRTs that were connected, the river taxis and the ferries. We also designed the industrial design components, all the furniture, both inside had a bronze feel, externally had a concrete for durability. But it was a language that would run through the entire city. We also, and then with the artist's involvement, we gave the identity, unique identity to each of the individual lines. So they became, the patterns and the materials became something that was gave its identity. And now we'll go on a journey to show you kind of through the station, where you're coming from the platform in an interchange station. You see the red line in the signage. You come up to the concourse level. Again, very simple kind of big, open, naturally daylit spaces to bring you up to the platform. From the interchange station, you have direct access out to the bus stops. from where you can get to the outer reaches of the city. As you come through here, you see, again, you come directly out of the station. The first thing you see is the BRT network, is the station. This now is the public realm. You come from the public realm up to the concourse. The concourse is intuitively bringing you to the platform, showing the transition then of the urban development and densification around the station to give them the vision of what the city could be like in 20 years' time. The unique identity, each station has a different kind of look and feel to it, given to us with our local partners. The messaging of what's the benefit of the public transport system to them is going to help them with their everyday life. This was something that, Jeddah Metro themselves were very happy with. This shows you the transition of the underground station becoming part of a bigger development. You see here the natural kind of routing through the underground system again, as you pass down to the platforms. And how you get onto the system. This is then showing you the experience of coming through Al Balad station. So again, this is the new public park that we've created. The experience of passing through that sunken courtyard, down through this very dramatic interchange between these two stations, the experience of the passenger as you pass from one stage to the other, the natural daylight coming all the way through. The very important part that the Mayor of Jeddah played in enabling us to work with the rest of his team. Again, it was a very simple transition between the interchange stations when you go from platforms to other stations with a shared concourse. And the interchange connection. You also see from the connection when you come up to the directly between the metro and the adjoining tram. This is showing the tram with its 90-meter-long trains. You see here the air-conditioned cabins that are off to the side. You have running along the Corniche. We have a Corniche tram, which was just a very simple shaded structure that allowed the trains to run. We then have the water taxi and the river boats travelling up. And most importantly then, to end, we had this vision to show them that this investment in the public transport system we were building today and in the next 20 years would actually be sufficient to, one, give them benefits of the spaces in between the stations. So you can see here kind of the benefit you get because you've now densified around the station. What we can deal with is many of the problems that they see today, such as pollution, the lack of public realm. Suddenly, you've got all this open space between the stations to actually then open up. And then in the future, buildings and vehicles will have changed. This idea of flying vehicles coming to the top of towers rather than condensing the underside of towers is a very different vision, but the investment they've made in the next 20 years is still there and has still dictated the plan of the city. And thank you. This is the vision that we hope we'll see one day.
Thank you very much, Angus. I mean, that was a very compelling presentation that makes me almost want to move to Jeddah. Would you like to sit down? Yeah. We can have a couple of quick comments, I think. I mean, my reasons for saying it might make me want to move to Jeddah is because it opens up the possibility of making the public realm so integral to the experience of the city, because, I could see those trams or trains or even the buses becoming mobile cafes. There'd be a strong case for having cold water available on them for obvious reasons, but maybe you have a coffee as well. So you've set up a platform for doing something really interesting there. Yeah. But I think the point, I would agree with you, the most compelling point is the way it's worked with value capture. And this is something that happens, transport hubs, but also art galleries tend to create value in the areas around them. But it's very difficult, and with the exception of this project, I'm not aware of anywhere that has succeeded in capturing the value created by a piece of investment and using it to maintain that public facility, be it a railway or an art gallery. Could you say a little bit more about how it works?
Yeah, I mean, what was interesting for us was that this Jena project was probably 4 years old now, 4 or 5 years old, from when we first took part in it. But the one thing they did, which was different to any other client I've ever come across, was they said, I want an architectural-led project and not engineering. All these projects are normally engineering-led. And I want a vision for how it can all come together. So in many ways, we're still waiting for Jena to implement this. This is a 20, 30, 40-year plan. Sure. But I've taken the knowledge that we earned here. We're actually already delivering it in Sydney. I'm also now working in San Francisco, in Silicon Valley, with exactly the same model. And it would not have been possible if we hadn't been given the rein to try out some things and gain some expertise by the kind of the city of Jena.
It's interesting. That anticipates what would have been my next question, which is how transferable are these things? Because, I mean, I take all the points about Jena being unique and you've got a cultural identity to work with there that is different to anywhere else. But there are, anyone who knows the work of Frost & Partners can see certain things that draw on other things. I'm thinking of Canary Wharf Station, or possibly the Madstar city in the Abu Dhabi desert, not a million miles from this, and with a similar sort of climate. And I think that in the way that you have come up with some very clever sort of generic transport sections, I think most of them are about sectional relationships between different levels and the ground level and the facility level. But it's interesting to see whether you can run that through this innovative financial model, because, I mean, it would make life an awful lot easier, I think, for anyone who's planning transport systems, if they can find some way of measuring and capturing the value, but also for politicians to make sensible decisions. Because every time, I don't know what it's like in the Netherlands or in other countries, but in the UK, every time someone mentions a realistic figure for a piece of infrastructure, everyone says, oh, it's unaffordable. This would make it affordable.
But I think that in many ways, there is a model for doing this, though, and it's actually, it's in London. If you Crossrail, which has been kind of, it's not open yet, but it's 25 stations linking east-west across London. We did Canary Wharf Crossrail station. And what that actually is, it's a completely different model. It's a very modest station. It's got a platform, it's got a concourse buried underground, but Canary Wharf paid for it. Canary Wharf said, Crossrail, I want to build a station, I want to put it here, because it's part of my master plan. And what they did was they said, and I'll pay for it, and I'll build it for you, but actually I'll build it to your standards, but I want 5 levels of retail on the top and a public park on the top. And I don't want to wait until you've got the whole network working before I make it operational. So what they've actually done very cleverly is already Crossrail Place is operational. It's got 4 levels of retail, big park on the top, and it's packed every single day. One day the station will open. So that's the model, I think, for how public transport should be funded and paid for in the future. And that's the model which has got us the job in Sydney, has got us the job in Silicon Valley, and I think will lead to many more projects.
Well, I think that's absolutely fascinating, because it shows the power of intelligent public finance, or public funding and public initiative, to unlock private value, which can then partly be used to pay for this. Through a more efficient system, I take it, I mean, some people might call it tax, but it's not tax in the sense of income tax or VAT.
No, it's bringing development partners in.
Exactly, and I think those sorts of partnerships, whether they're in transportation or in cultural projects or even possibly in healthcare, are the future and will allow us to have better public services than we have at the moment at an affordable cost. So thank you very much for a fascinating presentation.
Okay, thank you.